Is it better to punish or praise? Find out in today's episode. Welcome to Licensure Lifeline. This is your host, Matt Lawson, and today we're going to get a little bit into behavioral psychology. Apologies for missing the last week. Fun fact, in the therapy world, summertime is actually a bit of a doldrum for getting new clients. And I tend to get a lot of new people as soon as the fall hits, as soon as the weather becomes a bit colder. I honestly think that the sunshine in the summer has a lot to do with people just feeling better in general. But it's something to keep in mind if you're going to go into this field. Summertime is maybe a bit tougher, more difficult of a time for you to get new patients. Okay, on to behavioral psychology. This is going to be probably one of the cornerstones, really, of a lot of the work that you may do as a therapist, even with a lot of the processing that we do with some of the other modalities, behavior modification, things like negative reinforcement, punishment, classical conditioning, are going to be a significant part of what you're going to do with people, especially somebody coming to looking to change some aspect of behavior in their world, whether it be an addiction or just getting to the gym more often. But we'll look at a couple of different aspects of the behavioral psychologies, including some of the more influential individuals like B.F. Skinner, Ivan Pavlov, John Watson. And my hope is by the end of the episode, you're going to have a really great understanding, or at least be able to foundationally apply some of these strategies and techniques. So, behaviorism focuses on how we learn through interactions in our environment. It really emphasizes that behaviors are learned and can be changed through reinforcement or punishment. And the school of thought developed in the early 20th century. It's been around for a really long time. And two of the key figures during that time were John Watson and B.F. Skinner. Watson, in particular, believed that psychology should really focus on observable behavior rather than the internal process, thoughts, and emotions. So, a pretty drastic contrast to something like psychoanalytics, right? Where a lot of that is internal, looking at the internal world, trying to uncover these unknowns within the psyche. Skinner also followed in Watson's footsteps and developed the idea of apparent conditioning, OPERANT, which I'll talk a little bit more about in detail here. But anybody that has even tiptoed into behaviorism knows about Pavlov's dog. And that's where we're going to start today with some of the deeper exploration of this topic. Ivan Pavlov was a Russian physiologist, and he discovered classical conditioning through experiments with dogs. So you've probably heard the story where Pavlov noticed his dogs would begin to salivate, not only when they saw food, but also when they heard footsteps of a person bringing them the food. Over time, Pavlov realized that the dogs were associating the sound of the footsteps with the food. So he conducted an experiment where he paired the ringing of a bell um, with the presentation of food. So eventually the dogs got to a point where whenever they just heard the bell, they would start to salivate. This is at the base, like foundation of classical conditioning, learning through association. In this case, the sound of the bell, the neutral stimulus, was paired with the food, the unconditioned stimulus, to produce a response in salivation. After repeated pairing of the bell alone, now the conditioned stimulus could trigger the response, salivation, even without the food. As simple as this concept, these experiments were with canines, human beings are not immune to this. If you just think about the different things in your life that you have been conditioned to, in particular, I think of emotional eating, how, maybe just sitting down in front of a television cues your brain to go get a bag of chips. Um, I see this a lot in the addiction work that I do, where, Thursday, Friday is starting to get close, and I'll see my clients that, struggle with alcohol use starting to kind of get that itch of, hey, it's almost time to start drinking again. And we learn, we condition ourselves around these different behaviors. But the nice thing with anything that is learned is it can be unlearned or replaced with something else that may better align with a lifestyle or life that you would like. As promised, let's get a bit more into B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning. Apparent conditioning is all about consequences. So, according to Skinner, behaviors are shaped by rewards and punishment that follow them. There are two types of reinforcement in apparent conditioning: positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Both encourage repetition of a certain behavior. So, listen to these two descriptions here. I always would get these confused, especially around test time. But positive reinforcement involves adding something desirable after a behavior to increase the likelihood that it will happen again. For example, if you gave a child praise or a treat when they completed their homework, when they, or did something else positive, or did something else that you would like them to do. I was definitely that child that was raised with, if you're getting good grades, then you get to go to McDonald's, which caused all sorts of fun stuff later on with eating in my life. And we can talk about that later. Now, negative reinforcement involves removing something unpleasant to encourage a behavior. An example here might be a kid that takes out the trash and their parents stop nagging them. Maybe this has been a really sore spot in the family's life. The parents constantly feel like they have to nag the kid to take out the trash. But when you take that away, maybe it clicks in the kid's head, hey, if I just do this, then I don't have to listen to my parents nag. And that within itself becomes a reinforcer. But it's important to note here that reinforcement, whether positive or negative, always aims to increase a behavior. So you're never using this to decrease a behavior. This is both positive and negative reinforcement will always increase a behavior. Fun thought here, or maybe something to consider. What do you think works better, especially with kids? I'm just going to throw that out there. Next up, let's talk a little bit about punishment. So, with punishment, we're hoping to decrease the likelihood of a certain behavior. So, positive punishment involves adding something unpleasant after a behavior. Example here might be if a kid misbehaves, and you scold them. The parent yells at them. They punish them for doing something that the parents consider misbehaving. Negative punishment involves taking away something desirable to decrease a behavior. An example might be a kid losing screen time for not behaving or being condescending, or name it. If you have children, you probably have a list of things here. Now, with punishment, both types are trying to reduce, both positive and negative punishment are trying to reduce a behavior. But research has shown that reinforcement, particularly positive reinforcement, tends to be more effective for long-term behavior health. As a parent myself, I can tell you it is very, very difficult to always provide positive reinforcement. Especially, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she knows very well how to push those extra buttons. And you try, both me and my wife are therapists, and we know that positive reinforcement works better than punishment. Yet, you find yourself like it almost becomes like this instinctual thing, right? And it's important to remember that the punishment here is not going to be nearly as effective as positive reinforcement. So it is something to work on. It is something to consider when you are trying to change behavior in a child, to really change behavior in anyone. I think the statement that was made here can really apply to both children and adults. Okay, I hope that was some helpful information about behaviorism. Let's get into some questions now. First up, which of the following is an example of negative reinforcement? Would it be A, giving a child a sticker for doing their chores, B, scolding a child for running in the house, C, allowing a child to skip a disliked task after they finish their homework? The answer here is C. Negative reinforcement involves removing something. Remember that. In this case, a child gets to skip a dislike task. What is the primary difference between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement? A. Positive reinforcement increases behavior while negative reinforcement decreases it. Or B. Positive reinforcement adds something desirable while negative reinforcement removes something undesirable. The answer here is going to be B. Both types of reinforcement increase behavior, remember, but positive reinforcement adds something to that, something desirable. So positive plus sign, it adds something desirable. And while negative reinforcement removes, negative sign removes something. And question number 3, classical conditioning occurs when a neutral stimulus becomes associated with blank stimulus. Would that be A, conditioned, B, unconditioned, or C, negative? The answer here is going to be B. In classical conditioning, a neutral stimulus becomes associated with an unconditioned stimulus to elicit a conditioned response. Question number 4. Which scenario represents an example of a negative punishment? Would it be A, child receives extra homework for misbehaving in class, B, child's video game privileges are taken away for breaking curfew, C, a child gets rewarded with ice cream for doing well on a test, or D, a child is scolded for not cleaning their rooms? The correct answer here is A, child's video game privileges are taken away for breaking curfew. So negative punishment involves the removal of a desirable stimulus, in this case, the video game privileges, in order to reduce the likelihood of further behavior. And the last question here, which concept best describes the idea that learning can occur by watching the behavior of others without direct reinforcement or punishment? Is it A, positive reinforcement, B, apparent conditioning, C, classical conditioning, or D, observational learning? So we didn't really talk that much about observational learning, but it's going to be D here. Observational learning, which is closely related to social learning theory, refers to acquiring behaviors by watching others without needing direct reinforcement or punishment. So here is a strategy that might be helpful to remember this information. So keep in mind that positive adds and negative removes. So think of positive like the plus symbol, like I mentioned before, adding something desirable, e.g. giving a reward. Negative like the negative symbol removes something undesirable, e.g. taking away chores. For punishment, remember that positive punishment adds something unpleasant. Scolding, yelling, while negative punishment removes something unpleasant. So taking away privileges or taking away, negative punishment removes something pleasant. So taking away like a privilege or something like that. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I will follow up this episode with some social media stuff on our Instagram page. Please look out for some flashcards there. And until next time, keep studying.